Hey kiddos, it's Daddy-O, reading time, story time. I'm going to start tonight by telling you a little Grandpa Gordy story like we did last night. Last night we talked about ice fishing, and so why not continue ice fishing stories? Um, so I believe it was the winter of 1989, and I was about 10 years old. That means. And your Grandpa Gordy decided that he had this fishing weekend planned. He and his friend Mark were going to go fishing, and your mom, or my mom, your Grandma Carolyn, was a little bit concerned because although he does fishing plenty in the winter, lots and lots of ice fishing, lots of great ice fishing stories, there was supposed to be a blizzard that night, and so Grandma Carolyn was a little worried, and they were eating lunch together, and she was talking to him about it, and was very concerned. Grandpa told her all sorts of things to kind of calm her down and just say he does these things and these things to make sure he's safe. And he topped it off by telling her, honey, only the idiots fall in. And he really did say that. He said, honey, only the idiots fall in. So sure enough, that night, he and his friend Mark did go out ice fishing and had a good time. But due to the weather, the actual blizzard that happened, they did have to call it a night early and drive home. So as they're driving on the lake, sure enough, they kind of hit something or got stuck, and they quickly realized that the car was starting to sink. Very slowly, but maybe. They weren't sure, but they just had to get out of the car fast. And got a little ways away from the car and kind of watched it for a minute. And mind you, this was my dad's, your Grandpa Gordy's, brand new, only a handful of weeks old, Isuzu Trooper, this beautiful new car that he loved and bought. And anyway, it didn't seem like it was sinking. They weren't sure. And so they went ashore, knocked on a house of somebody they didn't know, and these nice people let them in so they could spend the night there sleeping. In the morning, they got up and looked out at the lake after the night of the blizzard, and sure enough, the car was gone, and it sunk down to the bottom of the lake. Yes, he said that day before to his dear wife, only the idiots fall in. No, he did not fall in, but his brand new car sure did. So I love you, Dad. Love all the stories you gave us in your amazing life. And kiddos, that's your Grandpa Gordy. All right, so let's move on to Chapter 9 of Gregor the Overlander. If you remember the last chapter, Gregor and Boots were stuck on a beach after trying to escape and were about to be eaten by rats. And they were saved by some of the Underlanders who got very hurt in this fight, but they did kill both rats. So here we go, Chapter 9. Gregor watched the water flash under his eyes as he clung to the bat. For a moment he felt relieved to have escaped the rats, but the fear of hurtling through the air on a wounded bat quickly overcame him. Boots had her arms clasped so tightly around his neck that he could barely breathe, let alone speak. And what would he say to Marth anyway? Wow, I'm really sorry about that whole thing back on the beach. He'd had no idea, of course, about the rats, but hadn't the Underlanders trying to warn him? No, they had spoken of danger, but no one had specifically mentioned rats, except the cockroaches. Rat bad, one of the cockroaches had said. And later they had talked about how much the rats would pay to bargain with Luxa. And Boots could have been sold to the rats, and then what? He felt nauseous and shut his eyes to block out the turning water. The image of the carnage on the beach filled his head. And he decided the view of the water was better. It turned to blackness as the light from the fire diminished. When light flickered off the waves again, he knew they were nearing Regalia. A group of Underlanders waited on the dock. They whisked the unconscious Perdita and her bleeding bat away. They tried to take Marth on a stretcher, but he brushed them off and insisted on helping to carry his bat aside. Gregor sat on the dock where Marth had shoved him as they landed, wishing he could disappear. Boots was quiet now, but he could feel her little muscles were rigid with fear. 15, 20 minutes passed, maybe. He couldn't tell. Ah! Someone snarled at him, and he saw Marth glaring down at him. The gash on his forehead was bandaged, the right side of his face bruised and swollen. "Find your feet, Overlander," Marth barked. He had actually thought this guy was shy a few hours ago. Gregor slowly straightened his stiff legs and stood. Marth tightly tied his hands behind his back. No question about it this time. He was definitely a prisoner. Another guard joined Marth, and they marched Gregor ahead of them. His legs moved numbly. What would they do to him now? He paid no attention to where they were going. He just walked whatever way he was pushed. He had a vague sense of climbing a lot of stairs before he entered a large, diamond-shaped room. There was a table in the middle of it. Marth pushed him down on a stool by a roaring fireplace. The two guards stepped back a couple of paces, watching him like hawks. "I'm that dangerous?" he thought foggily. Boots began to stir on his back. She tugged on one of his ears. "Home?" she pleaded. "Go home, Gego?" Gregor had no answer for her. People were hurrying past the door, talking in excited voices. Some peered in at him, but no one came in. In the warmth of the fire, he realized he was frozen. He was soaked in river water up to his waist and shivering from the wind and the horror of what he'd witnessed, of what he'd taken part in. Boots was in better condition. Her backpack seemed to be waterproof, and she was pressed up against him. Still, her toes felt like ice when they brushed his arm. Fatigue washed over Gregor, and he wished he could just lie down and fall asleep, and wake up in his bed where he could see the car lights flashing across the walls. But he had given up thinking this was a dream. What had happened to the Underlanders, Perdita, her wounded bat, and Marth's? If they died, it would be his fault. He wouldn't even try to argue that. Just then, Luxa appeared, burning white with fury. She crossed the room and struck him on the face. His head snapped to the side, and Boots let out a cry. "No hitting!" she squeaked. "No, no, no hitting!" She shook her tiny index finger at Luxa. Hitting was absolutely forbidden in Gregor's house, and it had only taken Boots a few timeouts to realize it. Apparently it wasn't acceptable among the Underlanders either, because Gregor heard Vicus's voice ring out sharply from the doorway. "Luxa!" Looking like she'd love to slap him again, Luxa stalked to the mantel and glared into the fire. "For shame, Luxa," Vicus said, crossing to her. She turned up. Sorry, guys, I'm just keep getting calls here. She turned on him, spitting venom. "Two flyers are down. We cannot awaken Perdita because the Overlander must escape. Strike him? I say we throw him into the Deadland and let him take his chances," shouted Luxa. "Be that as it may, Luxa, this is not seemly," said Vicus. But Gregor could see the news had upset him. "Both rats are dead?" he asked. "Dead in the river," said Luxa. "We scorched the land." "This matter of we, you and I shall take up later," said Vicus severely. "The council is not pleased." "I care not what pleases the council," muttered Luxa, but she avoided Vicus's gaze. So she wasn't supposed to be there too, thought Gregor. She's in trouble too. He wished he could enjoy the moment, but he was too racked with worry, guilt, and exhaustion to care. Besides, Luxa had saved his life, taking out Shed. He owed her one, he guessed, but he was still stinging from the slap, so he didn't bring it up. "No hitting," said Boots again, and Vicus turned to them. Like Luxa, Gregor was unable to meet his eyes. "What did the Overlander, Luxa? Fight or flee?" said Vicus. "Henry says he fought," Luxa admitted grudgingly, "but without skill or knowledge or weapons." Gregor felt like saying, "Hey, all I had was a stupid torch." But why bother? "Then he has much courage," said Vicus. "Courage without caution makes for early death, or so you tell me daily," said Luxa. "So I tell you, and do you hear?" said Vicus, raising his eyebrows. "You hear not as he hears not. You are both very young for deafness. Unleash his hands and leave us," he said to the guards. Gregor felt a blade cut through the ropes on his wrists. He rubbed the mark's time to restore circulation to his hands. His cheek throbbed, but he wouldn't give Luxa the satisfaction of seeing him touch it. Boots reached over his shoulder, and she touched the creases of his wrists. "Ow," she whimpered. "Ow." "I'm okay, Boots," he said. But she just shook her head. "Gather us here," said Vicus, sitting at the table. Neither Gregor nor Luxa moved. "Gather us here, for we must discuss," said Vicus, slapping his hand on the stone surface. This time they both took seats as far from each other as possible. Gregor pulled Boots up over his head and out of the backpack. She settled on his lap, wrapping Gregor's arms tightly around her and looking at Vicus and Luxa with large, solemn eyes. "I guess after tonight, Boots won't think the whole world is her friend," thought Gregor. She had to find out sometime, but it still made him sad. Vicus began. "Gregor the Overlander, there is much you do not understand. You do not speak, but your face speaks for you. You are worried. You are angered. You believe you are right to flee those who kept you against your will, but feel sorely that we have suffered in your saving. We told you not of the rats, yet Luxa blames you for our losses. We seem to be your enemy, and yet we gave you time." Gregor didn't answer. He thought that pretty much summed things up, except for the fact that Luxa had hit him. Vicus read his mind. "Luxa should not have struck you, but your fight invited horrible death to those she loved. This is greatly felt by her, as both her parents were killed by rats." Luxa gasped. "This is not his affair!" She looked so distressed that Gregor almost objected as well. Whatever she'd done to him, this wasn't his business. "But I make it so, Luxa, as I have cause to believe that Gregor may himself lack a father," continued Vicus. Now it was Gregor's turn to look shocked. "How do you know that?" "I do not know for sure. I only guess. Tell me, Gregor the Overlander, recognize you this?" Vicus reached into his cloak and pulled something out. It was a metal ring. Several keys dangled from it, but it was the roughly braided loop of red, black, and blue leather that made Gregor's heart stop. He had woven it himself during crafts class at the very same summer camp that Lizzie was at now. You could make 3 things: a bracelet, a bookmark, or a keychain. Gregor had picked the keychain. His father never went anywhere without it. Dun dun dun. Part 2, The Quest. Chapter 10. We'll pause there, kiddos. I'm so glad. I feel lucky to be your daddy and to read to you. I love you so much, and I will read again. I don't know exactly which night, but probably Monday night. Okay, 8 o'clock Monday night, Chapter 10, and probably another Grandpa Gordy story. Love you. Bye.